So, welcome to Module 6, Understanding the Group Processes and Dynamics in Counseling. So, today we're going to be talking a little bit more about what it looks like and the nature of the process. So, one of the important things is it's not just about putting people in a room and expecting healing to happen. There's a structure and a rhythm to how a group evolves over time. And the term group dynamics refers specifically to the intricate web of psychological and interpersonal focus that emerges whenever people come together with a shared goal. So these dynamics can influence everything from how members communicate, how trust is built, how conflicts emerge, and even how they're resolved. So ultimately, these dynamics are what allow growth and healing to occur in the group itself. Brighten up my screen just a little bit so you can see me a little better. So the group dynamics themselves, they're not static. They don't stay the same from the first session to the last. They shift, they evolve, and understanding this evolution is what helps group leaders to steer the group towards a meaningful progress. So think of a group process like a developmental journey. Just like people go through stages of life, groups go through phases too. So each phase comes with its own emotional tone and behavioral problems. And as facilitators, we must be able to recognize these shifts and respond to them with intention and with skill. So, first of these stages is typically, like we've discussed in previous videos, the initial stage, or in some models, it's called the forming stage. And this is when the group members are just coming together and everything is new, and there's new faces, new expectations, new fears. It's common during this time for members to feel anxious or guarded or even unsure of what's expected of them. Some might test the waters with small disclosures, while others might hang back. Observing and silently assessing whether this is a safe space is what they are actually doing. So as a facilitator, this stage is absolutely foundational. It's where you begin laying down the bricks of trust and respect and psychological safety. That means that being clear about the group's purpose, establishing ground rules, and reinforcing confidentiality, not just in theory, but in practice, is very important. You also want to start encouraging connections with people. Simple introductory exercises or pair shares can go a long way toward reducing anxiety and helping people see that they're not alone in their struggles. As the group becomes more comfortable with one another, we move into the middle stage, which is also broken down into storming, norming, and performing phases. This is where things start to get real. So here is where members begin to let their guard down and share more deeply. This is with vulnerability. With that vulnerability comes a richness of content, but also the risk of interpersonal friction. So people have different communication styles and levels of emotional readiness and personal triggers. So it's completely natural at this stage and healthy for conflict to emerge. In fact, if there's no tension at all, it might be a sign that people aren't engaging authentically. But conflict doesn't have to be destructive. In fact, it can be done in a way that makes it one of the most powerful catalysts for growth if people are embracing the breakthroughs. And this is when they are able to connect the dots between past and present, between thought and behavior, and begin the shift towards long-term patterns itself. Eventually, the group enters the termination phase, which is often bittersweet because it's the final stage. There's pride in how everyone has come so far, and also sadness and anxiety and sometimes fear, because ending a group can stir up old wounds of abandonment or loss, and members can struggle with saying goodbye. So, the facilitator's task here is to help the group honor the work they've done, reflect on what they've learned, and begin envisioning how they'll carry out their progress into the outside world. So, as a facilitator, you want to create a space for closure, celebrating the group's successes, acknowledging the challenges, and also giving people a chance to say their goodbye in a meaningful way. Throughout every stage that we're dealing with, group dynamics can be influenced by a number of underlying factors. So, leadership style is a big one. Are you directive or facilitative? Are you able to flex your style to meet the needs of the group? And then group composition is also something that matters, because a group with diverse cultural backgrounds and ages or lived experiences may require additional care to ensure that everyone feels seen or heard versus everybody being there for the same thing. Communication patterns, power imbalances, and emotional safety all play a role in influencing group dynamics. Even something as simple as seating arrangements or physical environment can impact how connected or exposed members feel. So consider you're in class and how often you have your favorite seat that you sit in every week. And then you walk in one day and your seat is taken, and everybody's been the same. Everybody knows that's where you sit typically. That can make you feel some type of way or feel less connected, or a new seat might make you feel exposed, like I'm on the hot seat. So, this is why leaders need to develop a high level of emotional intelligence and observational skills. So, you have to be able to read the room. You have to be able to read the room. You have to be able to pick up on the shifts in the energy of the room, on the body language of your members, or the mood of your members. And by doing that, you need to be able to make micro adjustments in real time. So, you're in the middle of a group, somebody feels some type of way, you have to be able to adjust to that person, and perhaps confront what they have going on before you can move forward with the group. Now let's talk about a more nuanced element of group leadership. So, exploring group members' fears. Fear is a natural and even necessary part of therapeutic work. So it can show up in many forms, like fear of judgment or fear of vulnerability, fear of change, fear of emotional pain, fear of abandonment. And it can surface at any point during the group process. So the key here is to know how to recognize it, respond to it in a way that honors the member's readiness and the group's developmental stage. So sometimes you have to validate it. Sometimes you have to take some time out of the group to be able to sit there with the group as a whole and reflect on what that member is going through, and invite curiosity about, like, why do you feel this way? Or is there another way that you can feel? Whenever you're dealing with fear in this stage, or when you're dealing with fear through any of the stages, because it pops up at any time. It depends on what stage it is as to how you discuss it and how you handle it. So, in the initial stage, fear tends to be more general. Members might be anxious about being judged or about not belonging. They may speak in vague terms or avoid eye contact or just stay quiet altogether. When you're in this initial stage, it's the leader's role to gently normalize those feelings. So instead of pushing for disclosure, we invite curiosity. So we might say something like, a lot of people feel unsure in the beginning. What is it like for you here today? Or what worries come up for you when you think about sharing in this space? So what these are low pressure, open-ended questions that signal safety and respect. And using reflective listening is also a great tool to use, because just mirroring back what the member says without judgment or interpretation can be incredibly validating. Like, yes, I heard what you said. Yes, it matters to me. So at some point, you move into the working stage. And here, the fears become more specific. So, and oftentimes more intense. So members might fear being rejected after sharing something that is deeply personal. They may be terrified of facing unresolved grief or trauma. At this point, though, the group ideally has enough trust and cohesion for deeper emotional work to take place. And leaders can take a more direct approach here, but it still needs to be grounded with empathy and attunement. So, for example, if a member hesitates when talking about their childhood, you might say, I noticed you paused. What's coming up for you in this moment? Or, is there something you're afraid might happen if you share more about that? These kind of questions invite members to engage with their fear in a conscious way. And you can also invite the group to support each other. So you could ask the group, has anyone else struggled with a similar fear? And how did you handle that? And when members share how they navigated fear, it reduces the stigma of you shouldn't talk about it, and also builds solidarity. And then whenever you move into the termination phase, fear may reemerge in a different form. So here, members might worry about regressing once the group ends. They may question whether they can maintain the changes that they've made. Some might emotionally check out as a defense against the pain of goodbyes. But as facilitators, we need to name these dynamics. You might say, as we prepare to close, I imagine some of you are feeling nervous about what comes next. So let's talk about that. You can help members to reflect on their progress, identify the strengths that they've developed, and create a plan for how they'll apply those strengths outside of the group. These reframes of fear as a normal part of transition, rather than making it a sign of failure or weakness. So throughout all of these stages, another thing that we have to be aware of is nonverbal signs of fear. Things like silence, fidgeting, sudden shifts in energy. These things are cues, and sometimes all it takes is a gentle, I noticed you went quiet just now. What's going on for you? To open the door. Leaders can also model vulnerability themselves. So they could say, I wonder if part of you is feeling a little afraid right now. That would make a lot of sense. So this kind of emotional literacy not only supports the individual, but it also enriches the group process. So now let's shift gears and talk about the ethical and culturally relevant strategies that guide how we design and facilitate groups. So ethical group leadership begins with a strong understanding of professional standards, like those that are set by the American Counseling Association, also known as the ACA, or the American Group Psychotherapy Association, so the AGPA. These guidelines remind us that we have a responsibility to protect our members' well-being through informed consent, confidentiality, and boundaries, and by safeguarding vulnerable populations. But ethical practice doesn't just start when the group begins. It starts during the planning stage of the group. So before the first session, we must be crystal clear about the group's goals, about the format, about the expectations. We must also screen our potential members to ensure that the group is a good fit for them and they're a good fit for the group. And informed consent, well, it's not just a one-time thing. It is an ongoing dialogue that we continue with throughout the process. Equally important is cultural competence. So in today's world, ethical practice is not just about being fair, it's about being inclusive. And that means recognizing that each member brings a unique cultural identity shaped by race and ethnicity, gender, religion, sexuality, socioeconomic background, and so much more. A culturally responsive leader doesn't just acknowledge these identities, they incorporate them into the group process. So, this might mean adjusting language, offering alternative materials, or adapting the group norms to be more inclusive. For example, grief might be expressed very differently across cultures. So, some cultures value stoicism while others value mourning. Um, and you have to be able to make space for all of it. Another thing that we have to keep in mind is ethical group leaders need to pay attention to power dynamics. So, who tends to speak more? Whose ideas get reaffirmed? Um, whose silence goes unchallenged? If the group includes members from historically marginalized communities, it's vital for us to consider the impact of systemic trauma. And you can't just treat the group as a vacuum. And what I mean by that is every member experiences are shaped by forces outside of the room. And this is why supervision and self reflection and continuing education on anti oppressive practices are not optional, they are ethical imperatives. Assessing yourself for your biases is also really important at this point because you have to know if you're going to have an issue with a person or a situation, or if you have a biased opinion on something that other people might not see the same way. And then you have to understand that sometimes that truth is just your truth. And you have to be like, okay, I understand my truth now. Now, can I understand somebody else's truth from their eyes and their perspective? So now let's wrap this up by diving into what makes group therapy actually work. So the therapeutic factors. These are the mechanisms of change. So the forces that make group counseling not only effective, but also transformative. So psychiatrist Irvin Yalom identified 11 of these factors, and understanding them helps create groups that truly heal. So those are groups that you will find, those therapeutic factors you will find in your book. So I'm not going to go into depth into those because I do expect you to do the reading for this week. But some of these factors that I do want to touch on is universality. So this is the experience of realizing that I'm not alone. When someone shares something vulnerable and others nod and say, I've felt that too, it's like a weight is lifted. And shame starts to dissolve, and isolation turns to connection. Next is the installation of hope. So people often come to group feeling hopeless. But when they see others making progress, they start to believe that change is possible for them too. Leaders also play a pivotal role here by encouraging and affirming and celebrating every small victory. Imparting information is another key factor. So, whether it's psychoeducation from the leader or peer to peer advice, learning about mental health, coping strategies, or relational patterns builds empowerment. Knowledge becomes a tool of healing. Altruism is about helping others, and in group work, this is huge because many members come in feeling like they have nothing to offer. But when they support someone else, they start to feel more valuable, and helping others also boosts their self-esteem. One more complex factor is corrective recapitulation of the primary family group. So group therapy offers it often recreates early relational dynamics. So someone who felt invisible as a child might find their voice here, or someone who feared authority might learn to speak up. So these reenactments can offer powerful healing when they're brought into conscious awareness. Development of socializing techniques and imitative behavior also go hand in hand. So group is like a relational lab, and people learn to give feedback, express emotions, and navigate conflict. And by watching others, they pick up new ways of being. Interpersonal learning is one of the most richest aspects of group therapy, because members learn how they're perceived and how they affect others and how to build healthier relationships with others. So feedback becomes a mirror that fosters self-awareness. Group cohesiveness is the glue. It's the sense of belonging and safety that allows everything to unfold. Without it, members really can't, they won't risk vulnerability. With cohesiveness, they will be willing to go deep. Then there's catharsis, and this is the release of pent up emotions. So it's not about just venting, it's a transformative act of self expression that leads to clarity and healing. And then finally, we have existential factors, and these are the deep truths that we all grapple with. So, morality, freedom, meaning. Group work often leads people to confront these questions and begin living more consciously. So, whenever all these factors come together, when there's safety and honesty and feedback and insight and connection, real change becomes not only possible, but inevitable. And as a group leader, it's our privilege and responsibility to cultivate that environment with care and presence and intention. So, as a summary, there are distinct phases that group development go through. And just as a hint, knowing the order of these stages are going to be really important. So, if you did not pay attention and you have not been paying attention, you should probably go back and listen to it again. Effective leaders adapt to their members in a way that is ethically and culturally competent. And when the therapeutic factors are happening, these create deep change for members. And remember here, fear is not the enemy, it is just the doorway to healing. So thank you so much for watching part 1 of Module 6. There will be another video for Module 6 part 2.